Oh gosh, this is amazing. This is cool. And it looks like my slides are at the very end. Is that something I should do or you should do? Here, I'll do it. Boop, 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 boop. Can you rewind them? It doesn't look like it's rewinding for me. Does this mean my clicker does or does not work? We'll find out. In the meantime, thank you so much for having me here. My baby sister is also here. It's her first time to a tech conference. She's also an engineer. And we were walking in, and there's all the music outside, and all the coffee, and gelato at 10 a.m., and I was just like, they're not all this nice. This is a really nice conference, and beautiful, beautiful country. So thanks for having us. And we have my slides. Awesome. Is there any way that I can get a view that has either the notes or a preview of what slide is next? If not, that's fine. We'll wing it. Again, my name is Charity, and my timer's going, so let's get started. It is time to fulfill the promise of continuous delivery. Yes. Did you do that, or did I? I think you did that. All right. Shall I just raise my hand whenever it's time to clicky click? Is there somewhere in particular that I'm supposed to be pointing it? Whoop. Yes. Okay. I think we got it. Yay! Thank you. Again, this is me. I co-wrote database reliability engineering. Observability engineering just came out. Like we're doing book party signings right now in the US. And if you happen to get a hard copy, we also have a sheet of stickers that we can send you so you can decorate it as you want. Send me your address on Twitter and I'll get you a sheet of stickers. They're great. If you have the aesthetic of a 4-year-old, you'll love them. Anyway, how many of you have ever, as an engineer, found yourself falling on this sword? I'll do whatever it takes. Yes, I was up all night. But sometimes you just got to suffer, or your customers are not happy. That's just the job. And then sometimes you move into management, and it goes more like this. Well, sometimes my team is just going to be sleep deprived and miserable, but that's just the way it goes. I'm not trying to say that there's never any pain. Yes, sometimes we have to do hard things. Yes, sometimes it hurts. But in general, these happinesses do not diverge. I've never met a product with really excited, happy users whose team was just miserable. And I've never met, a team that was super, super happy, but had they rise and fall pretty much in tandem, which makes sense because engineering is it's a creative industry, right? Writing code as engineers, like so much of it is unpredictable. It's chaotic. It's collaborative. It's like building like sandcastles in the sky with your brain. It takes focus. It takes, you have to be well rested. Like we all make mistakes when we're sleepy, and when we're happy, when we're miserable, and we don't want to talk to our users, we don't want to do a good job. Obviously, quality just suffers. It's way more fun to be good at your job than it is to be bad at your job. This might sound obvious. It's more fun to do a good job than a shitty job. It's way more fun to have users love you than hate you. And it's more fun to do your job when you've had the time to rest and recuperate than it is to just be at a grind, right? So it's super easy to say all these things. Do you want to be on a high-performing team? Yes, I want to be on a high-performing team. It's easy to say. I'm not even going to say it's hard to do, because I think that the problem that most teams have is not that they can't do it, it's that they don't believe they're capable of it, and therefore they don't try. But a lot of it has to do with, giving yourselves the tools, the information to actually do a good job. If you don't have your glasses on, you don't want to go barreling down the freeway because you can't make adjustments until after you've already hit the tree. Way easier said than done. But I think a lot of teams have this problem, and so they're like, we need to hire. This is messed up, but it's way easier as a manager or a director to make the case for budget to hire people than it is to make the case to get the time to work on the infrastructure and the non-directly, product-facing stuff that actually makes your lives better. You cannot hire your way out of this problem if you have a low-performing team. In fact, bringing more and more people into a team that's not performing well is just going to clog you and slow you down even more. It's a queuing problem, right? There's contention for resources, and if you just add more shit to the queue, the harder I try not to swear, the more it happens, so I apologize in advance.
It's okay.
Oh, okay, thank you. You never know. Some countries, I get people coming up to me afterwards like, that's not okay here. Like, some people, so, thank you. Much better now. So how well does your team perform? For starters, this is not the same as saying, are you good engineers or not? It's not the same question at all. High-performing teams are ones that get to spend most of their time solving interesting new problems that move the business materially forward. Lower-performing teams spend their time doing everything else. How many hours a week do you get to actually solve new problems that you're making progress? If that number is something like 10 or less, it's a problem. How high performing is your team? The best way that I know of to measure this is to start with the DORA metrics, right? In fact, a friend of mine just 2 days ago at the book signing party, I was asking him, how's your new job? Because he's had a series of pretty shitty jobs. And he's like, it's great. I've figured out the secret to not getting bad jobs. I asked them, have you read Accelerate? And if so, I ask, how has it changed the way you work? And if they say no or nothing, I don't go there. I think that's pretty dope, actually. How often do you deploy? How long does it take for your code to go out? How many of your deploys fail? How long does it take to recover from an outage? And I would add one more, which is just how often do you get alerted outside of work hours? Because getting paged during the day kind of sucks, whatever, but you're on call, you kind of expect it. What really burns you out, what really makes you just is getting alerted outside of working hours, right? When you're supposed to be sleeping, or you're supposed to be spending time with your family, or you're supposed to be on the ski slopes. That's what really sucks. There's an enormous gap between I'm not a fan of the term elite, but whatever. I prefer high performing. Elite kind of has this snobby air. Whatever. There's an enormous gap between high performing teams and the other 75%, right? If you're a high-performing team, your code should go live in under an hour. If you're not, it could take anywhere between a day and 6 months. Those are two dramatically different worlds. And if you look at this, year over year, more and more teams are figuring out how to be high-performing, and the ones who aren't are actually losing ground. They're getting worse. And this makes sense if you think about it, because tech is an industry where you don't get to stand still. You're constantly accumulating entropy, right? You build something, it works, and then over the next few months, it gets the performance degrades, your disks fill up, you get more users, they're using them in different ways, right? You have to constantly be looking for step functions to get ahead of the way your stuff is just rotting. Code rots on the vine, it does. So if you aren't constantly keeping up, trying to get ahead of it, you get really far behind. And again, this has nothing to do with how good you are at engineering. It really pays off to be in a high-performing team. These numbers are quite large. So then the obvious next question is, okay, great. We all want to not be wasting our time. Pretty fucking obvious, Charity. So how do we do this? Now, a lot of people will say, give me more money to hire more people, and then hire all the ex-Google people you can, all the ex-Facebook, hire everyone from Stanford and MIT. If they're super smart and they can write great code, just bring on the smartest motherfuckers you can find. This really doesn't work. Like, it aggressively does not work. Great engineers do not make great teams. It actually works in the exact opposite direction. Great teams are what forge great engineers. These, ex-Google, ex-Facebook engineers everybody wants to hire, they're not great because they came from Google or because Google hired them. They're great because they got to work at Google on this massively distributed system that's more interesting than any of the rest of the world for like years. That's what made them great. We have an apprenticeship industry. You get out of college, like, good for you, or you drop out, like some of us. You're not, like, all of this learning that you've accumulated does not make you a great engineer. It's getting to work with people who are amazing, people who have, the cumulative benefit of hundreds of person years of engineering, like all, like best practices when it comes to code review, like how to write, how to write queries that don't take your database down. This is something that's almost impossible to learn by yourself, and you really only learn by working on great teams. Like, for example, which of these kids is going to be a better engineer in 2 years? The one on the left, who joined a high-performing team, or the one on the right, who didn't? If they were equal going into that, the one on the left is going to have learned so much more, and the one on the right is going to have spent so much time just down in the muck. And what happens when, an elite team, this is the theory of we can hire our way out of this, right? We're just going to find the best code writers and put them on our teams, and they're going to drag everyone up to their level. No, it works the other way around. Your productivity will rise or fall to match that of the team that you join within, months, 2 to 6 months. And if you think about it, this actually makes a lot of sense, because so much of your ability to ship and own your code, it has very little to do with the algorithms, data structures in your head. It's about, well, what's the deploy pipeline like? Like, what safeguards are in place? How long does it take? If it takes your team 5 hours to ship your code, it doesn't matter how great you are. If you show up, it's still going to take 5 hours to ship your code. It has way more to do with the socio-technical system you participate in. The infrastructure, everything that lies underneath and defines how we can debug our code, how we can get it out. The smallest unit of software delivery is not the individual; it's the team. When you're hiring engineers, I feel like that's the wrong way to think about it. You're assembling a team, right? This is something that it's way more obvious when your company's small, right? You've got a team of 5 people, you're hiring a 6th, and you can't just hire a generic person, right? You're like, okay, we've got these areas covered, we're weak here. Like, what angle of diversity, of experience and expertise can we bring to the team? Technical leaders, and by this I don't mean just managers, but also maybe especially senior engineers, should really spend more time than you do on the feedback loops at the very heart of the system. The biggest one, I would say, is the deploy pipeline and process. But it's not the only one. Which brings us to CI/CD. There's this quote that our friends at Intercom have, which is, shipping is the heartbeat of your company. I think this is true of every single technical company out there. Your ability to ship, it should be ordinary, it should be commonplace, it should be regular, it should be a nothing burger, it should be as unremarkable as a heartbeat. And CI/CD, this is how we get there, right? So, if I go to a conference and ask random people, do you do CI/CD? Everyone's like, but of course, I absolutely do CI/CD. And then you start digging in, you're like, okay, what does it look like? And they're like, well, okay, so we definitely have a Circle CI account. And pretty sure we run some tests. No, we definitely run some tests. Yeah, the tests are on my laptop, we automatically run them. This is not CI/CD. This is at best CI. This is at best continuous integration. But the only reason that CI matters is as a preface to CD, by which I do not mean continuous delivery, which I feel like is a weasel word, which made sense 15 years ago. I'll give it to you, right? Okay, yeah, infrastructure as code was just sort of like embryonic. But these days, we have no excuse. CD needs to mean continuous deployment. Every time you kick off a test run, it should end with your code in production. Or it's a failed deploy, or it's a failed run. Continuous deployment will change your fucking life. Anytime you merge your code, the robot should kick into gear. It should be in production in 15 minutes or less with no manual gates. And I know that a lot of you are like, yes, but, which is great. I'm happy to take a lot of questions. The important thing is, honestly, I know that this is aspirational for a lot of people, but this is not one of these things where you have to do the whole thing to reap any benefits. Every step you take closer to this goal will pay off immensely for your team, for your entire organization. Honestly, if you aren't going to hook CI up to production, why even bother? Just run your shit on your laptop. It's effectively the same deal. Doesn't really matter. Any CI/CD job that ends without deploying your code to production is a failed run. And fear of deploys is by far the single largest source of technical debt in almost every organization that I've ever seen. How many of you have heard or read one of my diatribes about Friday deploys? A couple people? Oh, that's not enough. Fridays are a great day to deploy. If you're afraid of them, that's fine. Lots of people are. You've got to start someplace. But the closer you get to feeling safe with that, it's. Oh God! If I know only like 3 of you are going to raise your hands, I would have talked about that more. I got to move on. Anyway, the job of engineering leadership is basically to tune these feedback loops. The speed, coverage, and cadence of your CI/CD pipeline, that sets the high water mark for your team's performance. You can't get higher than this, right? And the benefits will compound all the way down the life cycle of the code. So a lot of people are like, okay, we get it. Good feedback loops. What does a good feedback loop look like? That's a great question. I would say it looks like this. Engineer merges their change using feature flags, right, to protect the user-visible code, which automatically triggers CI to run all the tests and build an artifact, which is then deployed to production, or if not straight to production, a cluster or an environment with real traffic, not just test traffic. Maybe it's internal traffic. That's fine. Or a small percentage of production traffic. I don't care. But it has to go live so that the engineer can then go and look at it and interact with it in the real world and start to understand how it's working. Deploying is not when you're done with your code. It's the beginning of gaining confidence in your code, because code on your laptop is dead code. It only matters if it's in production with users using it. That is the only code that matters. And this should happen in 15 minutes or less. The goal here is to feel like production is a REPL, that you're just like sitting there typing into. Yes, and of course, this is the way. Favorite meme of the last couple of years. This is the way. The more you have it, the more that it feels like a REPL, the happier your lives will be. Let's leave it with that. Things to note. Feature flags are very important. They help you decouple deploys from releases. Deploys are the process of getting your code out into the wild. Releases are actually putting it in front of users. These are two different things. They need to be very different. How many of you have ever had like, okay, the news site with our release is going live at 10 a.m. Our deploys take 2 hours, so we're all going to kick it off at 8 a.m. and cross our fingers that it doesn't like interrupt, or we don't have to roll back or anything. Like that's not good. It's also important, I think, that there are no manual gates in this process. It needs to be fully automated. Of course, in order to do this, you need to have tests you can trust. And in 15 minutes or less, 15 minutes is enough time. It is not enough time that you can forget what you were doing, right? You've got all this context in your head. You want to be debugging it and look at users use it before you lose that context. That is the most precious interval of time in this entire loop. That interval when you write the code and when you're looking at it in production is everything. Keeping it as short as possible is the key to having an effective team. Because when you're finished writing the code, when you're finished solving the problem, you have everything in your head right there, right? All the state, why you're doing it, what you meant to do, what you tried that didn't work, what the variables are named, what the functions are named, all of this stuff. You can never get that back again. It's going to decay as soon as you start doing something else. And nobody in the future is ever going to be able to recapture your current mental state, including you. This is the best time to debug that code that will ever exist. Which is why engineers can find like fucking 80% of all bugs right then. As long as you have good observability tooling, you instrument your code while you're writing it, and then you go and look at it. And you ask yourself, is it doing what I wanted it to do? And does anything else look weird? That predictable interval, the shorter the better, right? Lets you actually like hook into your body's intrinsic reward system. After you've worked this way for a little while, you'll have this little, I'm not done yet until I've gone and looked at it, right? You don't have to remember to go look at it because your body will tell you to. And after you've verified it, you feel great. It's like magic. The cost of finding and fixing bugs goes up exponentially from the moment that you write them. Right? You're typing, you write a bug, you backspace. Great, right? If you let it go out to prod and you look at it right away, great. If you let it go out at some point in the next few days and don't look at it, not great. Another really important thing is it lets you hold the line against batch deploys. And what I mean by that is software ownership. Like, 10 years ago, I am an ops engineer by trade, and 10 years ago, you expected for software engineers to write their bugs, their code, and ship it, and we just had to deal with it, right? That doesn't really work anymore. Our systems have gotten so complex that the only people who can really effectively debug code is the people who write it and own it. This is great, but ownership, the feedback loops that give you ownership should be as short and tight as possible because, if you wrote it, you deploy it, and you look at it, cool. But if you wrote it, you merged it, and then at some point in the next hour to week, it's going to get deployed with anywhere from 0 to 50 other engineers' changes, you're never going to look at it. You're never going to look at it. That link, that ownership link is completely severed. And when you do go look at it, or when it does break, well, the rest of the day is like over for everyone who had a change that went out in that deploy that failed, right? Like that eats up a lot of time. If you start batching up your deploys and shipping many people's changes at once, it gets pretty bad pretty fast. And I think of this as like, well, if your interval is long, you're almost certainly batching those changes up. And I think of this as the death spiral of software development, right? It's bad and it gets worse. It starts with, you have this long interval between when you write it and you deploy it, which means that your disks get bigger, which means that code review takes longer, which means you take a lot more time paging stuff in and out. It means that you take a lot longer to actually fix the changes and find the problems when they happen, which means you spend more and more engineering cycles just waiting on each other, and pretty soon you need specialists to run your deploys and run your operations, which means more coordination costs, which means you hire more people, which all cost more time. Remember, this is a queuing problem. You can spend your entire life chasing symptoms and pathologies and everyone else's bugs, or you can fix it at the fucking source. 15 minutes. 15 minutes or bust. And it isn't just about the economic arguments, although these are the ones you should probably tell your boss about. It's also, the question of how well you and your team perform. And I'll remind you, the definition, it's a quality of life issue. Engineering can be such a great job. It can be so fun. You can spend so much time just solving puzzles and getting paid to do it. Who gets that? Which means I think it's an ethical issue. I think that we have a responsibility to ourselves and to our teams to make sure that working here isn't miserable. High-performing teams are ones that score really highly in autonomy, mastery, and meaning. And it starts with keeping your intervals low and your feedback loops tight. So, my favorite question, how much is your fear of continuous deployment costing you? I wrote a blog post about this, and while I will absolutely affirm that I mostly pulled it out of my ass, I still think it's true. Here's my rule of thumb. If it takes you 15 minutes or less to write, ship, and deliver your code, it'll take X number of engineers. If it takes you hours to deploy your code, it will take twice as many engineers to do the same amount of work. If it takes you days, it will take you twice as many again. If it takes you weeks to ship your code, it will take you twice as many engineers again. And maybe you're like, that sounds like way too big. She's making this up. Yes, I am making it up, kind of. Although I've checked with a lot of people and it rings true. But still, if anything, I am underestimating this because it doesn't go up linearly, the cost of finding and fixing these bugs. It goes up exponentially. Haven't you ever seen an app or something and then gone and looked at the team and they've got like fucking 800 engineers? You're like, what do they all do? They spend their time waiting on each other and fixing bugs that don't need to be there. We waste a lot of time. This is a Stripe developer survey. If you haven't read it, you must. If you give this talk to your boss, it's like, watch this. We need to pay attention to our deploy pipelines and everything. And they're like, that's bullshit. Show them this survey. Fucking 40% of our time we self-report is wasted doing stuff that doesn't move the business forward at all. It's the most tedious parts of our job, and we do it a lot. A lot. What would you do with twice as many engineering cycles? What on earth would you build or solve? Well, go fix your fucking build pipeline and let's find out. In conclusion, that's all. Do I have time for like one or two questions? Or no? Two questions. Anyone?
Thank you for the great presentation. I have a question. So, where does testers fit into this picture?
Amazing. They're a great resource. They do not belong as a blocker in between your code and being deployed. Do it externally. Do it out of the loop, out of the critical loop. And a lot of people are like, oh, but I have really, really high security needs and really, really high. Well, then you need to do this more than ever.
So basically, tests can run, I don't know, every night, or they can do whatever, but you want to deploy as quick as possible.
Yes.
Regardless of consequences of possibly not.
Regardless of what?
Consequences of not fully be testable.
The consequence, this is complicated, all right? I'm happy to talk through this in more. In general, most interesting bugs, most interesting problems, you will never find offline. You're only going to find them at the intersection of users, production, and code. So get it there as quickly as possible and start looking at it there. Test in production. Test in prod or live a lie. Seriously.
Okay, so what is, in your opinion, the ideal time interval between development and release?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Okay. Again, in your opinion, what is the ideal time interval between development and release?
15 minutes. 15 minutes or less.
I finished the feature and it should be live in 50 minutes.
Sorry?
I finished the feature.
You finished a feature.
Yes, and it should be live in 15 minutes.
You finish the feature, you get it reviewed. As soon as you merge it, it should go live. Now, however long it takes you to like verify and validate it before merge, that's up to you. But once you've merged it, it goes live quickly so that you can go and validate it.
Yeah, but I thought with code reviewing, with testing and everything.
All of that goes before you merge.
Yes.
Yes. Great. So that can take as long as it needs to.
Okay.
But once you merge it, it goes straight to production. All right.
I think you are going to be talking about this on the meeting on Thursday. Yeah, you heard what she said. Charity majors, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
You were amazing. Thank you.